evening, Canterbury. Welcome to this extra edition of NewsMakers. With the so-called smacking referendum before us, we thought it would be a timely opportunity to profile one of the most ambitious organisations in Christchurch who confront the worst excesses of family dysfunction and child abuse on a daily basis. The Family Help Trust is arguably the most high-intensity early intervention service in New Zealand, interacting with some of the city's most troubled families. Joining us from the Trust is founder and director Libby Robins and the chairwoman Dr. Annabel Taylor. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Now, we are going to start with a bit of a fleeting history lesson about the Family Help Trust and its colourful evolution since 1990, Libby. Take us through your life story in 60 seconds or less.
All right, 60 seconds. That's a big ask, but 60 seconds. It was started by myself and two other social workers who were working within residential care and watching children in the care of the department kind of graduate into the prison system after they left. And so it was the whole intergenerational nonsense, really. So we grizzled and carried on for about 2 years and ran out of puff and then decided that we wanted to do something about it. So we got some start-up funding from the then Minister of Social Welfare, who was Jenny Shipley. We wanted to target the prisons, the Department of Social Welfare, but she said she'd like to see it in the prison system. So the rest is history, really.
Sure.
There's been a lot of changes over time.
Yes.
Particularly in terms of home visiting.
Right.
Yeah.
As I'm sure a number of viewers may have seen in the mainland in the press a few weeks ago, there was obviously in those early years a bit of an ideological division between what exactly should be the target market as such, and is there, a lot of families that are simply beyond help, and should they just be left alone and thrown in the too hard basket? You refuse to accept that, right?
Mm. Well, I don't think we can afford to accept that.
Yeah. So that has become the core area of your service, that the bottom 2% as they're referred to? Yeah.
And partly that's in recognising that this particular group requires a specialist service and a special commitment. You know, that when you have a service that provides for a range of risk, that there's a tendency for workers to drift towards clients who are more compliant, and that it takes a service that's really dedicated to the absolute top end to make sure that services continue to deliver to that particular group.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in those early days, compared to how we are today, of course we had Early Start, which is now known around the country as Family Start. That service is geared towards the bottom 15%, is that right, in terms of troubled families?
That would be about
yes.
right.
Right.
They've got a broader area of risk. So if you say that there are, let's say, 10 risk factors that we widely understand, which includes substance dependency and criminal history, etc., we will be targeting families who have 8 to 10 tics.
Yes.
Right.
Whereas Family Start will be accepting clients with 2 tics.
Sure.
So they could have one episode of depression in the family, and that's a tic. And perhaps low income, that's a tick and they're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would be looking at many more problems, than compared with that.
We're not interested in 2-tick families. We're only interested in the 8 or 9 or 10 ticks.
Sure.
Which is not to say that services aren't important, of course, for that lower end. But what we are finding, and also with our research program, is that it really does need specialist attention to this top end group.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you lose them. It's too easy to lose them.
In terms of the 2%ers, I understand that equates to 1,200 children born in New Zealand every year, roughly.
Yes, it is about that.
And on a Christchurch basis, we're looking at, about 100?
Yes, about 100.
Yeah.
Each year, that are born every single year.
Yeah. What kind of world are they generally born into? What would be the key signs you would see in those families?
Chaotic lifestyles, a chaos of inconsistent family and relationships and wider relationships, often very young, single parenting, having had experience with child, youth and family services previously through all sorts of problems with parenting and raising children.
So they've probably lost children already.
Yeah. Criminal history, having been involved in often the drug scene. We've got a high proportion of our mothers on the methadone program, so that's quite a feature of their lives. And poverty, absolutely,
and mental health too.
Having not having any assets. I mean, you normally sort of think of a mum with kids as having a reasonable sort of asset base to bring up her children on, but our mums really have nothing.
And family violence, so they sort of got the full 9 yards.
Wow. What a mission. What a mission. So how are they referred to you? How do you come in contact with them?
Predominantly through midwives.
Right.
Our largest intake would be through the midwifery services, because that's ideally where we would like to receive them. That's a huge window of opportunity. Trouble is that we have a waiting list, and inevitably it's very difficult for us to actually accept them antenatally anymore because we've got such a waiting list. But ideally that's when.
And if, let's suppose, a midwife thinks, from our screening process, this is a case in big need of attention from the Family Help Trust, is that mother, is that family compelled to engage with you?
No.
No.
No, unless CYF said do it or else.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're involved in the mix as well?
Yes, sometimes. In fact, quite often.
Sure. Yeah.
But and that issue of compulsion is a complex one, because often the mother knows, she's got at the back of her mind that I've had 2 kids removed already, maybe. Or I've had them in foster care, and with this new one, can I do things differently? That's basically the approach that the midwives are taking. So in terms of compulsion, in the back of her mind will be sitting, what happens if I don't make changes this time?
Sure, yeah. We'll further the journey after the break, but just before we go to the break, at the moment, in sort of broad terms, of those 100 children being born into Christchurch every year, the Family Help Trust has the resources to deal with, what, about a third of them?
Yes, about that.
Yeah. Ideally, you'd obviously want to deal with all of them, right? Yeah. Which is the ongoing challenge.
Absolutely.
Money.
Yes.
Yeah. Not just for us, too.
Sure. All right, we'll pick up on some of these themes, and we'll give you an insight into exactly what the Family Help Trust do with these families. That's coming up. Do stay with us.